1 second, let me just start recording.
Susan, your hair is sparkling. It's
I
just-
know, it just started. I don't know what to do. What is, woo! What do I do about that?
Enjoy the
Light
sparkle.
in your background.
Life needs more sparkle.
There you go.
You all set, Jay?
Yep, we're all set.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. This is a special work session of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is September 15th and the time is 7:01. Tonight we have review of the revisions in the comprehensive plan from the draft comments from the draft. We had comment period from September 2019 to December. And Kayla has made those adjustments and corrections. And I'll open it up to staff.
Great. Well, I think I am your.
Excuse me, we should do roll call first.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Maria Mack,
Here.
Pamela Rubinoff,
Here.
Sue Axelrod,
Here,
Steve Demasi is present. Missing is Joseph Murphy, Peter DeStefano, and John Riondo. Okay. All right, back to you.
Okay, so I, as the sort of former staff, am here to sort of talk it through, just because I've been the person sort of most long attached to the comp plan, and so really the purpose of us all coming together tonight was that when Jay and I were talking about how to move forward from here, we thought it was important, just not knowing exactly what your regular session was going to look like. And we wanted to make sure you guys had time to ask any questions of me or ask for any changes you really think need to happen in the plan. And so we wanted to just have this work session so we had a chance to bring that back to you. So you guys, I'm going to do a kind of backward look to just get us oriented to where we are. So the last time we talked about the public comment summary and the draft document was at your January work session. And at that time, the public comment summary, which is absolutely like a working document, there's probably typos galore in it, but that was in its first iteration. And then we basically at that meeting talked through the public comment summary a bit, and I left there with some direction on making changes. So I did that. So basically since I left you all in July, I've been working on the side a bit to get these changes back incorporated in the plan. As par for the course, I think with the plan, that took a little longer than anticipated, largely because of the remote server work being far away and tying into the South Kingstown server to keep it going. But so that all wrapped up about 2 weeks ago. And so we're here tonight to bring it back in front of you all. I took some time to update the public comment report so that you could see where that eventually landed. The vast majority of comments received, we made some changes to the plan with. Some of them were comments of support or just positions or opinions of members of the public. So those weren't really directing a change. There were also a handful of times where somebody directed asked for a change, but it wasn't something that rose to the level of a change that we really thought was necessary. So some of them we just kind of acknowledged that there might be some specific things someone wanted to see that might not be exactly in there. But so that public comment report, as I honestly wanted it to just be a companion document for you all to go with the plan. And really that's it. I'm just sort of here tonight to make sure you all have the opportunity to ask any questions you have and to talk about sort of where we go from here.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Any comments?
The only comment I have is it seems like forever since we've talked about this, and since we just were made aware a week ago that we were going to have this meeting, I don't feel like I've brushed up adequately on looking at the two, I mean, I read through the comments and the changes, but I'm still somewhat uncertain about I think it's difficult to look at the old plan and look at the new plan because we don't have sort of a redlined version. And I know things have been moved into different places, but I still feel somewhat unfamiliar and I'm unsure about some things. I'd like to have a better sense of anything that's been eliminated. I know that one of the comments in here that was addressed was something related to the one of the SMDs and language had been removed, but then put back in. And I want to be sure that we're all aware of anything else that's been eliminated that may not be obvious. I still would like to feel more comfortable about the differences between the two. I know that some of the language that we added was really good, but again, I want to be able to compare them more thoroughly somehow.
Any ideas on how we could do that?
Wow.
I'm thinking about it a little bit because I'm trying to think of what we have to, like what we have sort of in the file coffer, what we could pull that might sort of help get there. And so I think there's kind of two reasons, and you sort of alluded to them, Maria, or described them in there, but there are two reasons it feels different, right? Some of it is we changed within each element the way the elements were structured, right? They each start, we created this guiding principles section, right? We broke out baseline information to set sort of the statistics and the data we knew that led us to the needs and opportunities. And that was a pretty similar format, but it was actually the 2014 plan had information filtered into those buckets in different sorts of ways. And so some of it was actually within the elements, changing where the wording was so that it more clearly described what we do today, what we're experiencing and observing in conditions, and where it leads us to new directions, where it leads us to new opportunities and needs, right? And then on the other hand, we also did changes to pull entire sections apart and move them into other areas, right? Mm-hmm. If we think back to the 2014 plan, the sort of poster child example of it is we used to have a section that included recreation with open space. And in separating that out, that element seems like a totally disassembled and re-put back together because we took that one element, split recreation into its own standalone piece, and then paired open space with natural resources, which seemed like a more appropriate pairing. And so there's those changes we actually made in there. And then there is also just the formatting, which adds like another onion layer of sort of how do we show what changed from A to B, because it also switched from being a document put together in Microsoft Word to something that was put together in Adobe InDesign and Illustrator. And so that track changes function we lost when we moved into that format, right? The ability to it's really just track changes in Microsoft Word got lost, but we didn't lose it in the beginning, right? We lost that when we went into formatting, which is more like 2019 era. And if we think back to 2017, beginning of 2018, you guys, particularly Pam, Maria, and Steve will remember, we did those work sessions element by element. Mm-hmm. And in those, we actually did have like it was all still in Microsoft Word, and we were still in that section of dragging the elements around and putting them. And so I'm wondering if maybe a look at those would be a good intermediary step, right, to see where things have changed. There is definitely some information that came out that I can even just talk through right now, right? We had Well, let's actually start with the one that went back in per the comments. So with the special management districts, the plan in 2014 had the language for the purpose of each of those zoning districts written in the plan. And one way we were trying to slim down the plan, as funny of an idea as that is, because they never get slimmer. But one way we were trying to slim down that plan was to pull out that sort of language if it had already been codified somewhere. So all of those purposes of the zoning district are actually written in the zoning ordinance too. And so me trying to find efficiency thought pulling that out would be an acceptable way to do it because it was already codified in the ordinance. But to the commenter's point, to the your community member's point, they felt like that might have taken away some of the background support for it, or it might make that district more subject to change in the future if our plans didn't continue to describe its purpose in that way. In my mind, it was just if you don't need it in both documents at the same time. And to the commenter, it was important that it felt like it was in the plan. So that was very easy to put back in. But so it was more, so there's a lot of those changes, right? There's a lot of things that didn't actually change where we were headed with the plan, but pulled out a little information. In the 2014, I think it was actually the 2010 perhaps update, there was a pretty good amount of work done in this visioning work that was written in the plan. There was a lot of findings from the visioning surveys done at that time. And we pulled those out of this plan, right? That's one other thing that's very clearly different, because each time we do the plan, we use the new public input to refresh it, right? And so if we just keep adding to it and adding to it, it's just going to become just unruly. So I'm wondering if we think about like how to describe those changes best. It's the question is really, I suppose, what parts of change do we want to see and which ones are the most important to see? Because we have those track changes documents from when they last had content changes, right? Once we got into the formatting, the development of the plan sort of happened in phases. And I don't think this was the way I'm positive this is not the way it was intended when we started, but it ended up happening in phases. And at the end, we did this whole formatting push, which is where things get really hard to follow back and forth. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if just recirculating back around those work session drafts would show a bit more of the what changed in there in a way that might be helpful. I'm just thinking about what we have, like what we have today that might connect the dots, because it is sort of the bouncing ball dribbling forward. We stepped it from here to there, and we do have all those documents. It's just we've been working on the plan for so long, we're seeing sort of the bookends,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hear what Maria is saying, and it was really hard to figure out where to start to review all of this. And so I went with just going through your notes, Kayla, which I think was a great way to put it, at least for this last iteration, by taking all of the comments and either acknowledging that we've made some changes or just saying it's been received. And I know that we went through most of them individual, as a board, we went through many of them and said, yep, let's make that change, let's not make that change. And I have to say, because it's such a convoluted process, there's just part of me that wants to say, okay, it's done. And that if we have some changes in the future, we make those changes in the future. I think that we're losing a lot of opportunity here to not have our comprehensive plan updated. And so there's part of me that just wants to trust that the spirit and the intention of what we've put into this so far has been communicated through Kayla in these changes. And it's just really difficult to go through the whole thing again and then again and again. So I guess that's where I leave it, is like, how many more times can we keep on reviewing this? And each time that we review it, time passes by and we might want to change it again. So I'm kind of overwhelmed by the review of going back and forth and seeing all those links and going back and looking at an old draft and such. And so there's part of me that just wants to say, Kelly, you did a great job. Thank you. And let's move on. So that's just my kind of gut feeling.
Yeah. This is not really my place to speak, but you guys know me, I can't help myself. So thinking of those, I'm thinking about this really, like, my feeling on this generally is that I feel like we worked on it for so long. And honestly, the work you guys put into the like reshaping of it, right? Like what would be written differently, what new policies, what new things, like what needed to be adjusted in a meaningful way, what shaped how you wanted to see a new policy crafted or one revised because it didn't seem like it was going in the right direction for you. Those ones, all those changes happened back in our work session periods of time in 2017 and 18. So there's a lot to it that the plan just looks different, right? And that makes it particularly difficult to compare side by side. But it also makes it seem like there's a lot more change in that plan than really is present in that plan, right? And so it wouldn't be such a hard thing, I think, to look at the action items and the policies and the goals, the things that, like, a plan is a plan. And I'm going to sort of say this as an off the cuff thing now, having us all spent years and years working on it, but a plan is just a plan. And so it really only is the direction it sets for you and the steps you take from there that matter from a plan. Otherwise, it's a very, very charming document that sits on a shelf, right? It's really what you document in the plan, how you tell the story of who you are, whether or not it feels honest and accurate to who you are, and then whether or not the goals and policies you see in it step you forward in the way you want to go. And so I think that when we try to think about the changes that matter most in the plan, that's a good lens to keep on it, is look at what's different in the policies, look at what's different in your action items, and what's going to be, look at really what you're trying to do different to see what's different about it. And as long as the elements, when you look at them, seem to tell the accurate story of who you are as a community, there's nothing in there that seems like a red herring or data that seems to push you in a way that's not accurate to where and who South Kingstown is, then Pam, I do think the right way to look at it is to look at it as sort of a new document, right? Because every 10 years you redo your comprehensive plan, it really is a resetting of where you're headed. And that was what we spent a lot of time working on. So that, I think, the most meaningful places to look for changes that you know, and where you feel about them is probably in there. But in general, it's just important to know that I, at the staff level, didn't make any content or meaning changes past the point where you all talked about them as the planning board or directly attached to something in this public comment summary. Any change you see in there was either discussed at the work sessions in 2017 and 2018 and re-reviewed, or is attached to this public comment summary.
What Pam said hits home with me too. I mean, this has been a long process and we've reviewed it, and over 3 years, it's hard to remember back to those individual work sessions where, again, we went through each chapter and each element and discussed it. So I feel her pain as well. And again, the longer it sits here and is not formally accepted, we're still working on the old comp plan.
Can I chime in? So I respectfully disagree with Steve and Pam, for me, because I didn't sit through 2 years of meetings. I'm a Johnny come lately here, but we haven't seen this in 9 months. And I was very impressed by the public comments and the thoughtfulness of the people who contributed their ideas and their vision for the town. At the risk of making enemies tonight, I would like to put this back out a little bit so that the people can, I mean, it's been 9 months or a year since public comment. The folks that made comments haven't seen this new version. I feel like I would like to see a short window at least where the public can see this again, the fresh document, because it is an enduring 10-year document. And I would like to feel like we have listened to the public. And maybe because I watched the marathon town council meeting last night that went till 1 o'clock in the morning, but the theme that kept coming up from the people in the town is that they don't feel like we are transparent. They don't feel like the town is friendly to the public's input and what the public has to say about our activities in town. And I think I would hate to feel like the planning board would be lumped into that negative vibe that people have, that we don't want to hear what they have to say. And I don't know if there's, I don't want to try to hold this up, and I know that we all don't want to read it again, but can we include the public in any conversation before this goes to print?
So
comments-
that is, sorry, I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump in really.
Okay, go ahead, Kayla.
I'm going to jump in with a technical piece. So Susan, before the plan, so the planning board does not adopt the comprehensive plan. So before this goes to print, right, before this becomes your binding document, it's the town council who determines whether or not to adopt the language you guys have drafted in here.
Okay.
And they hold a public hearing. So this basically from here, what has to happen, the trajectory of adopting your comprehensive plan is the planning board makes a recommendation after holding a public hearing, which was held, and then a public comment summary was also included in that in November and December of last year. The public comment summary, Steve was right, and I actually keep abbreviating it, ran from September until December last year. And this is where all of the comments in that public comment summary came from. But from here, the decision before you all next, as like your next step in the timeline and how this goes, is a recommendation to the town council who holds a public hearing. And so there is another public hearing round that happens with this document per the council, who actually adopts it.
And we had held a public meeting for that, and then we closed that meeting but held it open for comments through December 19th,
But-
2019.
You know, I certainly don't want to hold this up, but I think that the town council relies on us to be absolutely certain that we have a full and thorough understanding of the document. The fact that we only had, 14 written comments and 6 oral comments in a population our size, I find that a little less than desirable. You know, hopefully more people will show up at the council meeting, but I think the council relies on us to go through it in detail. Given everything that they have on their plate, I think it's highly unlikely it's going to get the kind of scrutiny that it would get from planning board and planning department. And I would just like to make sure that what we're seeing here is, I want to know the difference between, because I still have all of those hard copies of the different elements, but when I look at them, I'm not sure what sort of was the final wording in those. I have lots of notes all over them. But I would like to make sure that I'm very clear on changes, language that's been eliminated. And the other thought that I had was that I feel that it would be worthwhile somewhere in this plan, whether it's under the citizens element or elsewhere, to talk about this plan is now having been produced during the COVID pandemic, and some kind of reference to what we are dealing with, from the Zoom meetings to any other issues that going forward we feel may need to be addressed, not to make it anything lengthy, but I just feel that it's worthwhile there being a reference to this in this time that, you know, we would be sending it on, passing it on.
To your point, Susan, about public input, a lot of the comments that were written, submitted to us were a lot of the same people that have been commenting on the council, to the council last night about the Shepherd's Run. I mean, there is, and actually you were one of them. There's a core group of townspeople that participate in town government and hearings. And before we went to Zoom, you were a regular, you know, attendee at our meetings and at our work sessions. But you know, having sat out there in that audience, you know that it was a lonely place. You know, there's not a lot of input. We had the open house. I think we had, maybe initially at one, we had 50 people. And then I think maybe the open house, we had 100. And some comments were taken then, but it is a struggle to get public input. And and even now, because of Zoom, we have more information available to the public by this basically live agenda that they can click on and see all the information that a planning board member or town staff is able to see. And, you know, the information is there. It's easier to get now than ever. And we still struggle to get timely comments to what we're trying to do. And hence, that's why we actually extended the comment period back in 2019, because I think it went to November and Kayla only had a few comments from people. So we extended it another month or so to get more comments. So I'm not sure what else we can do to get that information.
If it goes to the town council and people make really good comments, does the town council sit with a red pen and mark up a document and hand it back? Like how could a really worthwhile and thoughtful comment be incorporated into this document once it's on from here to the town council? Like, is that a thing? Like, can it come
Well, yeah,
back?
because we're only submitting a draft recommendation. It's so they can make changes in it.
Yep. Or if they adopt it, does that mean that we're done? Like that
Yes.
we no
Yeah.
longer have our hands on it?
Mm.
And if I'm correct, and I'm sure we have one of our staff people can support this, but if they hear comments, they could then potentially send it back to us and say, look at this policy, or look at this and this. Or they might say, yeah, we agree, let's strike this. So they have the option to do either.
The solicitor will probably chime in there at some point because it may depend on how substantial the change is that the town council is considering making. If it is very substantial, so somebody comes in with some, you know, grand change that everybody thinks is a great idea, they may have to go back to the planning commission, because it's the planning commission that's initially charged with writing the comprehensive plan. But it's up to the solicitor. If they think it is within the council's consideration, the council adopts it just like any other ordinance, and it's done.
But the council does have the ability of sending it back to the planning board at their leisure.
Yep.
You want further input on something.
If
If
can they make any changes without it coming back and just instruct staff
Oh,
to
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of people asking when it's going to be done. Why haven't we adopted it? I mean, we're getting it from all ends. And at some point, it's a living document. It's never going to be perfect. We try to make it perfect, and that's why we have the option twice a year now that we look at it to make changes in it.
You may want to think too that, you know, you've been working on this for a long time. maybe lack of participation is community burnout. They've contributed the input they had to contribute, and now they just want to get it done and move on. So you are going to lose them at some point.
Maria?
Well, you know, Steve, you had said that it seemed to be the same group of people. And perhaps that is the case, but it would be, I think, a worthwhile effort now that we're in this completely different world to see if we can reach out to folks and see if more people might respond that may not have. Granted, they're not going to read 388 pages. But if there is a synopsis or Kayla's notes or something that could be helpful, I think it's highly unlikely that the council is going to make any changes to this document. I just don't think they're going to have the time to delve into it. Perhaps if someone comes up with some brilliant idea or something that we missed, they may say, hey, that's a good idea. But my sense is that, as I said before, they have a lot on their plates. They're relying on us. And, you know, we just want to be as thorough as possible. And it's not that we haven't wanted to get this passed. And it's not that we've been sitting around doing nothing either, as everyone knows.
I think I'm going to ask you guys a question because I'm hearing this idea that there's some new idea that needs to be introduced. Now, do the four of you believe there is an idea that needs to be introduced into the plan that you expect to hear come from the public that we're trying to make room for? Or is this an exercise in civic engagement? You know what I mean? Do we want to, because functionally what you're describing is holding another public hearing with the planning board, right? Before it moves forward to another audience. So, and I've heard, you know, will the council change it if there's a hole? And I'm wondering, do you have an understanding that there is a hole?
No.
I'm
don't either.
not certain. I mean, you know, like I said, I would like to be able to know that I can look at the 2014 plan and this plan and whatever redlined version we have of that, so that if we are asked any questions, we can answer them. And again, getting the word out. I think it needs to be on the town website, Facebook page, whatever, to try to get folks to turn out.
Well, don't we currently have a draft of the comp plan available on the town site?
That's a question, I think, for
Yeah.
current
Looks like-
staffers.
Looks like Brian's Googling it now.
You know, I hear us. I totally hear, and Susan is the most recent member and clearly keeps an eye on social media and is active in participating, for instance, in the town council meeting last night. And so I really appreciate that. And I know that so often we say that information is available and people can, and we provide opportunities, and it's just such a challenge to get input and to be able to know when to stop. And, you know, when do you have enough and when is it substantive input? So many times we get input and people are, I'll say for myself, complaining that we don't have a noise ordinance. I just called the police yesterday to say, how can I deal with my neighbors? And I said, I know we don't have a noise ordinance, and so I can imagine myself coming before you and saying, okay, I want a town that's quiet. I want a neighborhood that's quiet. And so I'm just trying to understand, and I do this for a living also, trying to understand what is the best way to get input. And we're always going to have people that are not happy about X, Y, or Z, but it may or may not be a comprehensive plan. It may be some other kind of issue. And so when do we say, let's close this and let's open up a new chapter and try to figure out a way to continue to take more comments. And as Steve pointed out, every 6 months we have a review. But on the other hand, I very much appreciate what Maria is saying is, I can't pass the straight face test and say, I've read every single word. And I totally agree with this, because I have to say, I'm I'm overwhelmed by the changes, the many times that we've read things and then we go back and forth and back and forth. And so, this goes back to the old adage, what is it about perfect versus good? Is perfect the enemy of good? And so I'm just having a hard time trying to figure this out.
I like the straight face comment. No, it's true. I mean, and I don't know, I don't spend any time on the town's Facebook page. I don't know if it's on there or not. And I don't generally spend a lot of time on the town website unless I need to look something up specifically, because we have all the links and the agenda sent to us. So, is it on that front page? Is there a way to reach out and say, have a look at this, we're talking about it? I mean, I don't think most people knew about tonight's meeting because it's not a regularly scheduled date. I don't know. I just want to be certain that we have all of our ducks in a row and that we can send it on with complete confidence and know, and again, not to say that our work was shoddy or not thorough, but it's just been a long time, and I want to know the differences between the two, and it is complicated, as Kayla said.
I
Brian.
just looked, the draft plan is on the planning department's webpage. It's not on the front page of the town website. Were this to go to the town council for the full public hearing, I would say, yeah, we would get in touch with the clerk's office and make sure that it was front and center there for everybody to easily find. But I think anybody that goes looking for a draft comprehensive plan right now would go straight to the planning department's page and find it fairly easily. I'd also like to say that, the danger in trying to, gin out and get all of this new interest that you may be looking for is that you simply wind up rehashing a lot of the stuff you've already spent several years working on. Typically, that's what I see with people that come late to a process, is that they wind up talking about stuff that has already been pretty much beaten to death. You had a strong core of people that participated and produced a product. And if it's, bring it up, let it sit for a couple of months, bring it up, let it sit for a couple of months, you're never going to get through to the end of the process.
I think the other problem we're going to have is, Kayla, how much longer are you committed to?
I no longer have a South Kingstown computer capable of accessing your files because the new planning director starts. And so that equipment and the access to it, which includes the program to edit the document, is now out of my hands.
Okay.
So that's sort of why I was saying, well, I wonder what we could work with the existing files we have to try and see where we can get things pieced together. At the risk of sounding clearly like I have a personal opinion on where you guys are at on this plan, I'm just going to have it, and it'll be just one opinion amongst them all. And I think another thing that happens in plans when you keep working on them for a long time is we actually start to create a cyclical problem where now the elements you worked on first need to be revised. And we're starting to get there already in this plan, where in reality, because the plan in many facets is similar in policy and direction to the 2014 plan, we've been working under it for a while. All right, a lot of the things that are directed as new actions in there aren't new. They've been things you've been pursuing. And already leading into this evening and leading into the last meetings we had in 2019 and the beginning of this year, some of the comments I'm getting are, shouldn't you be refreshing this with new information? And this policy has already been done. Why hasn't it been removed yet? Because when we started writing the plan, it hadn't been done. And so I'm at once sort of saying there is a planning conundrum we can fall into here, where we keep revising the plan until the point where the plan that was as it was revised in the start needs to be refreshed again and doesn't feel accurate to people. And that tends to happen for us when we're already living under the plan, right? There are already actions that were written in the draft plan in 2018 that were struck from it because we've already adopted it and moved forward. And so I think my bigger point, I'm making kind of 2 points, right? One of them is that there is a real and tangible danger in continuing to revise until the whole thing starts to feel like it needs to start again, right? And it's not a small lift to update these elements. But it's also something where you start to lose the work you're putting in because you're already moving forward under this, right? We already are doing the things that were discussed in 2014, refined in 2017 and 18 and modified. And now we're already at a place where some of the comments I'm receiving are things that say, that's already been done. I'm like, which is great, but it also shows that we're already moving forward under this plan. And unless there are problems we know to be there, let's tackle the issue of how to make sure the public is presented this information correctly, instead of being concerned about revising this plan to be a plan that every 6 months feels accurate and up to date, because it's meant to have a little bit longer of a trajectory. And right now, when we're about 3 years into an update, we're starting to hit this point where we're either going to keep living in an update cycle. And and if that's the case, then I think the way to do it is with your periodic updates to it more regularly, right? And instead of trying to package it all as one big thing, because we get further and further away from those changes as we keep, continuing the process.
I see. Go ahead, Maria.
I by all means don't want to rehash anything, but I want to make sure that what we're sending, that we are clear on what the changes are, because as I said, it's very difficult to tell. I mean, the comments are all well and good, but that they don't, there's nothing that demonstrates what was and what is proposed. And I just want to be sure that I can answer questions if asked. And I think, again, the number, I'm not really happy with the number of participants that made comments. Those that did made very helpful comments. Thank you to them. But, considering our town's population, I think we need to try to get more people involved. And I would like to have, I think what Kayla suggested early on, just some kind of document that allows us to really understand what changes have been made. Like, we don't have a red line copy.
Right.
Okay.
And so the red line copy is something that can't really be produced,
Right.
right? Because of the format
Right.
changes. So let's think about what can be produced that fits that need for you, Maria.
Mhm. Great.
And I'm asking you, what really, I
Can
really honestly
you-
am, because it's not actually, and it's largely not my work being doled out anymore, right? It's largely about the new planning director and the team in the office and what can be done there, and then what you guys can contribute to that too, because I'm at the end of my contract with the town is in 2 weeks and the equipment's been returned. So what I have that is sort of, we haven't talked about tonight, is I have the presentation and the staff comments that went to your public hearing. right, that talked about those big format changes, right, of like
Yeah,
what buckets were pulled into what other buckets and how it was reshaped. It also talks through what are the really new goals, new policies, anything that was substantive and new, right? Anything that we were pushing in a different direction, not just saying, oh, geez, that number is out of date. And we talked about it a little funny here.
Mhm.
So we have that, right? We have that actually already from your hearing, because like I said, the only changes that have happened since then have been this public comment summary. But the other side of that I haven't been saying is all the changes that came before, I think are summarized in that material. And so maybe if we reevaluate that material, it's going to have some of those bigger picture pieces.
Okay.
I think the goal of, getting to that sort of like line by line change is just, it's an unruly thing to get to.
Right,
I don't
yeah.
know that, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I'm talking big picture changes and, just having a really thorough understanding. But I do think that there should be a reference to, as this plan is being sent forward and ultimately passed, we should reference what, the way we are now living. I think there should be a pandemic reference in there somewhere, that as this comprehensive plan was passed, we are,
Wait, what do you mean a pandemic reference?
we should reference that as this comprehensive plan was passed in September, October 2020, we are experiencing a pandemic which has required us to make certain adjustments to the way that we have meetings and whatever. I just think we should reference that in this document.
Well, maybe that just gets referenced in the way, maybe there's a very, we should revisit what it says of what the process was. And that could just be
Yeah,
the
simple.
end of the
Just-
process. Yeah.
Just something simple, so that it's
Speaking of
a photo in time.
Speaking of
speak.
public input, we do have 9 attendees and we have one hand raised. Sue Marcus is looking to comment. Maybe Jay, we can bring her in.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted, Susan. Go ahead.
Okay, well, as a public member burned out by this process, I would just like to say that I think getting this document passed is a really important thing to do. It's been an incredibly long time in the coming, and it was really too bad that so much effort, this was one of the things that I commented on at the end. I mean, I sat in on a lot of the working sessions, and I noticed in the public comment thing that Kayla sent around, and hello, Kayla, it's lovely to see you.
hi, Susan.
Those just reflect the very last version and don't show how much public input went into the working session documents, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that, and I think it's just, as a public member, it is very hard to find things on the website. It is impossible to read 388 pages and make anything out of it at all. I think going forward, I would like to see some process in which the public is invited really mostly to focus on maybe the last parts, the table parts of what's planned or something, and not read all the descriptions of how wonderful the town is. I don't know. I think that needs some attention, but I fall really into the Steve and Pam move on camp here. I think it's really time to just get this document out. I think if it had a notation about what how COVID derailed the process as part of the general description of the process, that would be useful. And I think you should give Maria those redlined versions so that anybody, the new Susan, the other Susan, if she wanted to read those things too, she could do that. So that you could see what was taken out, what was altered. which you can't do now in this formatted document. And that just allows me, my comments, I think almost all of my comments were about the format, which I just think is miserable. I think it's an embarrassment to the town to have a document that is formatted this way. And I would just like to remind you that the document should not have been so seriously formatted until such time as the text was final. You can't be editing such a heavily formatted document, particularly in any public process. So please, in the future, let's never do this much formatting, and let's never let the formatting get ahead of the documenting. That said, I think now, post-COVID, I would have a whole lot of things I'd like to see that would be different in the plan, which is part of why I'd like to get this plan done and approved. Because I feel like the whole thing is just, it's totally antiquated. And we're not going to go back and rewrite this plan. So the better thing, it seems to me, is try to get it approved by the state, bring it to a close and start the 10-year clock or the 6-month clock ticking or something to be able to start making adjustments to this plan. I think you could have a lot more interest after the COVID in a number of issues that people weren't interested in this document before, in housing and land use and water treatment and a whole lot of things I think people would be more interested in. So that's just a long way to say my vote as a citizen who does try, and I do emphasize that it is a pain. I try to find these things on the website. I try to read them. I try to pay attention to what the process is, and it's painful. And I just would love to see you get this finished. I was horrified when the SMD process around the Shepherd's Run was taking us back to the 2014 comprehensive plan. We've had this plan finished for months. We really should just get it done. So for the moment, that's all I want to say. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Susan. Jamie Murdoch, can we unmute him, Jay, please? Jamie, go ahead. Go ahead, Jamie.
Jamie, I'm not sure, your microphone may not be on. You may be unmuted, but your microphone may not be enabled. If you hit the drop-down box next to the mute button.
Yeah, how about now?
Yep,
There you
you're
go.
on now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it turns out my webcam wasn't plugged in, so I had nothing. Okay, I've been checking because I was one of the ones that commented last December, and I really appreciated how that was processed and the memo that came out. I've been checking the website to see if there were any edits for me to look at. And there is something on there. It's the 2019 comp plan that was, and that PDF has a date of last September 20th. It's not the new files. Your agenda today has new files in it with new text. So I haven't seen any of this. And I'm just kind of saying that, I've been hunting and looking for it, and it's not posted, although it's in your agenda, and I'm finding it now, and I'm happy to look at it. Getting this released means it's enforced, and that's important. And so I like the idea of getting it out there. Because there's no red line available, I don't know if something was put in that snuck in or deleted, or, you know, I don't know the meaning of what is happening with this new plan and what things might have been done to it to support some kind of goal or agenda or intention that won't, you know, that isn't outright stated. You know, why was it rewritten? What did we try to fix and change and do in this new plan? What things was it fixing in the past? I can't look at a red line, and unless I try to compare text to text and match things up from where it was before, it's hard for me to, you know, the people that commented, we spent a lot of time on it, and I just zoomed in on one thing, the Kingstown Road SMD. And if a red line can't be done because of this format change, can the meaning of this change be described in a memo to the public? You know, what was what were you guys trying to do when you did this update? What things were issues in the old one that you're trying to fix, or what new things are you trying to enable? And these are often instructions given to the contractor who writes the update. All right, we want you to do an update. We want you, you know, this needs to be fixed. That's broken. You need to, we're trying to enable this thing. We didn't like that thing, whatever. And all of that is behind the scenes conversation that I'm not privy to. And so I don't know, you know, what happened in here. And I would have known if there was a red line, because I could at least see what disappeared and what went in. So if instead of a red line, which you can't do, I understand, what were the instructions given to the authors of this update? Because that would be a good signal of what you're trying to accomplish. And I presume the instructions were much more than completely change the format to something different. You know, I'm sure there's meat in there. I have no comment on the format change. I didn't know it needed a format change, but maybe it was done because it's easier for some people to understand. I also know that the general public doesn't really understand what the comprehensive plan is and how it really drives zoning, and it drives the nature of the town. And I thought that those early meetings were really good meetings. 2017, I guess I attended a couple of them. One was in planning department, things put on the wall. I loved all that stuff. And it gave those of us who even understood what a comprehensive plan, you know, some insight. But the general public doesn't know. All they know is something happens, and where the hell did that come from? You know, and I've got a Dollar General that wants to move in into a special management district that was designed to specifically with text in there to prevent commercial strip growth. And the Dollar General is more commercial strip growth in this messy area. And in fact, it's a very extreme example of that. And so that's my own personal, you know, thing going on here, because and that's my focus on the comp plan, and that'll continue to be my focus. But the comp plan doesn't seem to be driving zoning, doesn't seem to be driving the behavior of the planning board and of the zoning board in the way that words in the plan says it is. And I don't think the citizenry understands this, you know, and I guess I'm saying in effect, I think the planning board is missing a piece of their function when it comes to this, because commercial strip development is why the MU zones were created, and it's not being addressed with the Dollar General plan, and it should be all over the place with the Dollar General plan, and I don't understand why it isn't. That's not the topic of this meeting, but part of it is, how does the comp plan affect the citizenry of this town? How does it drive the behavior of the planning board and of the zoning board? And how does it drive code changes that it's supposed to drive or it has failed to drive? That's of great interest to me. And I don't think there are too many people in this town, besides the people that serve on boards, that really get it with all of this. And the reason I get it was I was involved in the formation of the original comp plan. And it's complex. It's hard for people in this town to understand it. But I can tell you, when I put a picture of a Dollar General on Kingstown Road on a Facebook page, a whole bunch of people said, "Oh my God, no." And those people then never came to review comp plan and provide comments, and never came and talked to the planning board. They didn't. They're just gonna, they're gonna react when it shows up. And that would be a shame if, you know, because you guys are supposed to really make sure that you understand what the citizens want, that it's embodied in the comp plan, that the comp plan is driving code changes, and that the comp plan is really the vision of the citizenry, and that it's doing its job in driving the future of our town. And yet I totally understand why nobody's showing up to talk about it in these updates. It's and I don't have a great answer for that, except all kinds of marketing and time you don't have, and, you know, town meetings and whatever. I don't have a good answer for that. All I know is I'm pissed about something, and I've got a lot of energy around it, and I know how to get a whole bunch of other people pissed around it. And it seems like a reactive way to do things. I hate to do things that way. And we were doing it that way with the South Kingstown Neighborhood Congress, and it worked, but it's an adversarial approach, which should only come out when all else fails. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
All righty.
Can we bring Deb Bergen in, please?
Hi, my name's Deb Bergner, and I'm just trying. I tuned in a little late, but I'm just trying to catch up a little bit. It's interesting, as I understand it, and correct me if I have misunderstanding, that we started this about 3 years ago, and it was going to be like some parts were going to be updated, but then somehow it turned into a full update. And then we also hired a consultant to do a zoning study about 2 years ago to work on some issues, but that person's not here, right? And so, like, what are their contributions? Because I think that was more around affordable housing. So have you talked about that a little bit? And then I kind of heard a few minutes ago before the last caller that, you know, it sounds like you don't really like this plan, but you want to just pass it and then move on and start immediately and do something again. So I don't know, that's kind of weird to me. I'm trying to understand why we would just pass something we don't really like just to then start the process again. And there's only 3 or 4 of you here, and I know there's a new member, so I'm trying to get the lay of the land. I'm sure other people are too, but it's just kind of strange that those pieces aren't clear. Like, if you don't like it, why would we pass it? It's not something that's going to sit on a shelf. We're going to use it for a long time, for at least, it could be 3 years of trying to then revise it. Maybe we could like have a memo out to the community. My husband's watching the Celtics, sorry. Maybe we could have a memo out to the community with some big picture changes so that we would understand what the big elements that were changed. We don't need to know the tiny detail, but like the high level, so that we as a community would know that. I don't know. This is a guiding document for us, so I'm just trying to get my head around it. I know it's not an easy topic. It's, you know, you have to have a deeper understanding of planning and land use and all of those elements. So it's not something that someone can just dive into and, you know, become familiar with easily. But I think that we have to try a little harder to get the community, and I don't know how to do it because these meetings are hard. You can't come in the last bit and try and have a lot of input. And so it's a sustained engagement. I don't know how you create that, but I think the thing I'm walking away with is, I feel like someone said, you don't really like the plan, but we're just going to adopt it and then move on and start over. So I'm like, how bad was the one in 2014 that we would want to replace it with this? And again, because we can't see the red line, change it. I mean, it's hard because if you can't see that, you can't see what the prior version was to see where we're headed, but we don't like where we're headed. So that's just my takeaway. I don't know if I misunderstood something. I'm mostly curious about the zoning study and the consultant and where that change would have been falling into this plan, because it's 2.5 years later. We spent 100,000 plus on this person or persons, and where does that weave into this project?
Okay. I don't think, Deb, that the planning board members don't like what we've produced. I think there's just some questions. As Maria said, it's been a 3-year process. We had work sessions where we went over each element individually and discussed them at these work sessions. But again, it was over a 3-year period. And as Maria said, I'd like to see what was originally stated and what we're looking at now, because over a 3-year period, we've forgotten, or we're not as familiar with it as when we discussed it at those work sessions. But I'll ask Kayla to go over with you the reason for the update and the consultant that came in. Also, by state standards, we had to add 2 elements to our update as well. But I'll let Kayla run through some of that for you. Go ahead.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Hi, Deb. So I'll give you what I can for sort of the timeline and what led us through the process, and then I will tell you briefly what I know about the current housing study and that status, so that I think we'll probably touch on a few of the points you're looking for. So the comprehensive plan update actually started with you all in, I believe, actually January of 2017 is when you held your first kickoff meeting and public input event. That is actually 4 months before I actually started working for the town. So that happened before my time with the town, but that was when the project kicked off. And when it kicked off with an understanding that this would be a limited scope update, and that limited scope update would be done in part by the staff of the planning department in writing those 2 new elements Steve mentioned. One is around energy and the other is around natural hazards and climate change. And those were actually changes that had happened at the state level, requiring a new plan to have those elements within it. And so those needed to be sort of put in. They were not present in the 2014 plan because the standards at the state were changing right around the same time as the update was being put forward. And so there was, to my understanding, a knowledge we would need to go back to that to get those 2 other required elements by the state in there. And so we basically, when this started out, there was a scope of work given to a consultant, And now I'm going to confuse you. And so to try and make sure I don't, because it's not my goal here. But the same consultant has had 2 separate contracts with the town. So their first contract was a contract related to this plan, the comprehensive plan. And at that time, the Horsley Witten Group, I believe, was contracted in 2016, and then the work started in January of 2017 to help oversee this update. That contract basically put the work of writing the 2 new elements, like I said, onto the staff of the planning department, and then asked for Horsley Witten to just go through and update the data points in them and do like a bit of a refresh on it. So that was the initial scope of work. Our initial scope of work on the update to the plan was get those 2 new elements we need, and let's go through and do just a refresh on any of the data points in the plan that were getting old. Because if you look at the 2014 plan, that actually had some dated information in it too. And so some of it was starting to feel like it was getting very old from the life we were living as a community in 2017. And so that was really the initial scope of work, right? Was let's bring this data up to date where it's gotten a little old, because the 2014 plan wasn't always even 2014 data. Some of it was 2010 data. And then let's get those 2 new elements we needed in there. And so I joined your team. And when I joined your team, my first project to work on was those 2 new elements, and working with Horsley Witten, the consultant, doing basically the project management on their update to the data points in the elements. And we worked on that with the planning board. And I'm going to say it's the first meeting, but that actually is probably just hindsight. But very, very quickly in the process, it came clear to me that the planning board wanted to have more discussion than just data updates. So when the draft of Horsley Witten's, I'm going to pick an example, right? The housing element or the economic development element came out from Horsley Witten with those updated data points, and any sort of places where we were missing information to meet the state standards for the plans, it became clear in our conversation that there was actually more of a desire to talk about the policies and make sure that they were right and felt right for the community. And so we spent a little more time on them. We talked through all of the policies that were in there to see whether or not they were still supported, whether we'd already done them, whether they were confusing and we didn't understand how to exactly execute them, and really to sort of spend some time in that policy and implementation action side of the plan to really make sure that this planning board felt confident owning that plan. Because in 2017, when I started, there was a very clear concern that you really hadn't had the opportunity to pick it apart, tease it apart, and say, do we really believe in this? Is this really who we are? Is this where we're going? Or is something off, or does it need to be course corrected? And so it absolutely was a little bit subject to some mission creep. I'm gonna own that right out of the gate, but I think in a good way, ultimately, because it actually puts you all in a spot where, regardless of the amount of time and how much changes happen, the time was taken during that 2-year period with the planning board to really go through and suss out what those things were and to sort of ground truth them. And so that is really what the scope of the update to this plan was. A goal of the planning department leadership at the time was to see the plan also become this new modern format. We introduced the idea of themes throughout the plan. So themes like sustainability and aging populations, community resilience, things that were very important to sort of how we were living or how we thought the community could be strengthened, but that didn't fall into the buckets of those elements of land use, housing, economic development. There were more cross-cutting themes. And so we spent some time to suss out where those topics came up in different areas of the plan to create a little bit of a different way to read it if you were interested in something by not just required element, but by something that was impacting your life or an area of interest for you. And so we tried to bring it into a totally new sort of shape so that it became a much more searchable, visual, engaging document, which in and of itself was a pretty big undertaking. And so those really were the main things of what this update to the plan was. We got those, the most important piece is we got those 2 new elements in there, and that is where you'll see the new information, things that you won't find anywhere in 2014's plan to look back at. And the other elements, they really were an adjustment to them, and they weren't substantial adjustments. None of them were headed in the wrong direction, let's reassess. It was more looking at each of them to say, do we really understand where we were going with this policy or this action, and how are we going to do that? And then making that a little bit clearer for us all, what steps we were going to take and what had already been done. So that was kind of the scope of the update. Separate from that, the Horsley Witten Group was contracted by the town to work on this housing study. And so the housing study it's not on our agenda tonight. It is not affiliated with this plan, but I will say that the idea on that project is it's a standalone item from the comp plan, but it was really to look at the fact that we knew housing was a topic that was causing a lot of concern in the community, and we wanted to make sure we understood exactly how our current policies were serving us and where the people wanted to see that go. And so that's been a very separate policy, more clearly tied to creating adoptable changes to regulation where they were needed. Whereas this comprehensive plan is more a document that lays the groundwork for future changes like that housing study. The housing study, I think, was already a thought in people's mind when we were working on the update to this plan. So you won't see this plan say much about that housing study. I believe it acknowledges that we're going to do one, and that will further sort of refine where we're headed as a community towards housing. But they're separate matters. It was a little bit convoluted because it's the same consultant whose name appears on both sides, but that is really kind of what's at play there.
Thank you.
Could I also add, Kayla expressed it in a very thorough manner, and I don't think at all that any of the board members dislike what's on the plan. I think there's very, very good language contained in the plan. It's just important that we're all very clear, since we haven't been immersed in this for so long, exactly what the final version is, and that we are able to respond to any questions that might come from the council. And actually, in previous years, when the state law required both bodies to vote to approve a comprehensive plan or changes made to such, we would hold a joint public hearing. And of course, that was in person. It was a little easier, and we would answer questions, and the council would be able to ask us questions directly. So in this case, we will be sending our advisory opinion to them, and then they will hold their public hearing and make a decision at some future date.
And one thing, I mean, I think this is sort of a trend of our meeting tonight, but I'll tell you one thing that I'm hearing loud and clear. You guys really, really need something that accompanies this thing as it goes forward, explaining what the goals were and why it was different. And where I've fallen short on you guys tonight is to give that to you tonight. But what I want to make sure everyone knows is that's not something I think we fell short on as staff for you guys in doing it. And I don't think it's something we fell short on sort of being able to show where it came from and where it went and why we did what we did to it. I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to mention it again for Ms. Bergner, since she, I think, joined a little late. When the planning board did your hearing back in November, there's a lot of information from that presentation that sort of summarized this, but we can make sure that when this, so if I'm going to put it forward, I'm going to put this in sort of what I would imagine happening, and then you guys, it's your decision and it's yours to do. And there's really even no decision to be made tonight. But ultimately what I can do is I can certainly help you guys have a really good introductory document to your recommendation to the town council that sets the stage of, this is what we changed. This is why we changed it. These were those high level changes. these were some of the small changes that might have had policy impact, right? Because those, to be honest with you, from a planner's point of view, those are actually what the most meaningful parts of that document. And so we can absolutely make sure you guys have all of that information there, because like we said, pointing out the sort of vagueness of it now and sort of all of the places we've come along the way may start to tell some story of something very different. And that's not really the case, right? Like that information is there, and I can certainly put some time. That's like a Microsoft Word document I can do from here, of just going through and making sure that that introductory document or a companion document really sort of makes that clear to you guys before you move it forward to the council.
That'd be great.
That's, you know,
Very good.
that seems like something that seems necessary to you guys, and it seems important for everybody. And it's certainly not even a hard lift, because it's mostly reusing stuff we have, but just bringing it all together at one time, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Kayla.
Really
And
good.
again, just because of the length of time that this is progressed across, it's that would be helpful to tie it all together. And again, in your defense, you wanted to make a document that was user-friendly, easier to understand by the general public, and easy to access in the information. And instead of having to read the whole document, you could, you know, you had an index and you felt it would be easier for the public to look at this document and find what they wanted from it. And I think we've pretty well gotten there.
Kayla, that would be, I think you described it perfectly, what we need. And you have the institutional memory to be able to do that. So if that's at all feasible, to be able to put that together, I think that that would really help guide the rest of us, because, you know, several of us have been, you know, thankfully, most of us have been in this through the process. Susan, you've done a great job getting up to date very quickly. And I think that it would be really nice to help guide us as to what the changes were, so that we could be confident that those are the right changes going forward. And I think that we really need to focus on what it means to have a living document and to really commit to that. And so, you know, I heard Steve say we're going to go over it twice a year. And if that's on our work plan, you know, that we really schedule, you know, those work sessions and public hearings, perhaps, you know, twice a year, and really commit to that, so that we not only get it for ourselves. And I know that we've been keeping, Steve, I think that you started keeping a list of what we wanted to change in the future of, you know, for the work plan of, oh, we have to go over this, we have to do this. And I think that that's really good for staff to support us on that of, oh, this came up, maybe this needs to be in a comment within the comp plan or within the zoning ordinance, you know, kind of keeping our policies and plans and programs alive. And that we probably could do a better job of that if we had, you know, full staff, if we had, you know, we've been going through some transition, so that's really been difficult. So hopefully we could get there.
Okay.
I just wanted to just come back for 1 second. Kayla, you and your answer was exactly who you have been as a professional in South Kingstown. So you're thorough, and when you answered my question, it made me think that perhaps in addition to just writing that introductory memo, like a 2-minute explanation of the history, because we're a consumable people, and someone is not going to read your lovely 5-page document, but they might listen to you for 3 minutes. And when you explained the two, like, think about it, that's the benefit of we're actually watching and listening to you, and in our own homes. And so I think if we had, maybe the planning board thought about, you know, here's this project that we're underway, and this is the history, and this is why, because, you know, I knew that Horsley Witten was doing the housing study, you know, but I wasn't clear that, you know, that's how they came in, and the 2 elements was really help. I mean, you taught a lot in about 5 minutes. I don't know if people would watch the whole 5 minutes, but if that was on a website and someone said, here's what the project's about and here's why, people might read that rather than to go through minutes or to go through entire meeting. And I think maybe as a planning board, you could think about highlighting some of those things so the public could learn along the way. But I think you are very thorough, Kayla, and that you demonstrated who you are as a professional in those 5 minutes that you've done for the last 3 or 4 years here. So it makes me think that that's maybe the way to teach is through videos, because people aren't going to necessarily do a deep dive. But I do think I do love the high level document, and maybe that you just speak about what it is in the high level document, and then people can watch it. And if they want to read through the pages, then they do that. But I think there has to be some combination of other media besides read this document or come to a meeting, and maybe it'll happen, because COVID has changed how we do everything. I mean, I vaguely remember the planning board meeting from November and people giving feedback and asking questions, but I think it feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, we're in a different life. So I just want to go back, and I think the takeaway for me is to figure out little tiny 2-minute videos or answers to questions or something that they're on the website that people can say, what's the comprehensive plan? I mean, it could be written and also have a video, whatever the topics are. But I think that if you think that people are going to read a 5 or 10 page memo, maybe some will, but many would just rather let you teach them for 2 to 3 minutes. And so maybe the next planning director might take some of that on. I don't know if they're as video friendly as you, but that's just my suggestion, because you struggle with engagement. But I think also the other piece is Zooms are good and bad, because we're all tuned in. We're not there. You know, not everybody was coming to the planning board meetings, but if you have 10 people watching, maybe this is a way to get other people at least paying attention. So maybe Zoom won't go away, even if boards meet in person eventually. This is my thought. Thank you very much.
I actually think we get more people watching us on Zoom than we did a lot of our planning work sessions, where we have 1 or 2 people in the audience, and they felt kind of lonely out there. Sometimes we had to invite them to the table. But anybody else in the audience that would like to speak?
Oop.
No?
Oh, hold on one second.
Jocelyn has something?
Hi, Steve. How are you?
How are you, Jocelyn? Go ahead.
I'm very well, thank you. Kayla, nice to see you again.
You too.
Thank you, Kayla.
Hear you.
I know it's a whole new world. First of all, I just want to commend you all, because this is an amazing job. It's a huge job. It's a breathtaking job, and it's taking the people's input and the citizens of South Kingstown and their dreams and wishes and hopes for our town, and creating a document that defines how we all behave, and how the community will grow and expand and maybe not grow and be restrained a little bit. So I think you've done a great job. There's a little bit of a difference between what you've presented tonight and what's on the website. And I got a little confused by that. So, my comment would be in a work session that the information that you're putting out to the community definitely needs to be congruent. I think that when you have someone who tries to do their homework ahead of time and then comes into a work session and goes, whoa, wait, that's different. It's hard to have meaningful input and be a part of the dialogue if there's changes between what's on the website and what's actually being discussed in the work session. Kayla, I love your suggestion of having some kind of an introductory document or PowerPoint or description of what a comprehensive plan is. For people who may not be familiar with it, I sat across the table from Jamie Murdoch with the first comprehensive plan many, many years ago, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. But there are people in our community who do not understand the promise that's within a comprehensive plan once it's developed and voted upon and agreed upon. So there may be very helpful to describe to observers, as Steve said, people are turning in more and they're watching more and they're participating more because they can. So describing what a comp plan is, that it is a promise between the town's leadership and the people on how we'll have relationships during growth and planning and zoning. And so I think that's really all I have to say. I have followed to the best as I can. In healthcare, it's been a hard time for me to follow anything right now except get sleep and eat and go back to work. So I think you've done a wonderful job. Congratulations. I look forward to the joint meeting, and I would ask that you publish consistent material so that those of us who are following can get caught up. Thank you so much for recognizing me, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian and Jay, obviously you've heard that. We've got to get that draft document over in the planning department website replaced and put the current one in there if we can.
Yeah, we should be able to get that fixed tomorrow. That should be pretty simple.
And then when we get Kayla's summary, we can move this forward to a meeting, to our next meeting for a full discussion with hopefully with all the planning board members.
One thing I was going to add, because I appreciated the commenters who joined this evening. I'm remembering a conversation that this board had in the spring about how, wouldn't it be great if we could have little mock videos that showed what's going to happen when you show up at a planning board meeting, right? And so I think I appreciate the commenters because it reminds me of something that we've thought about before too. And it sort of, I think, probably put some new energy into it for you all. But one thing I do think for sure, and I'm going to grab it because Jocelyn put the card down and I'm going to pick right back up, which is, I think the presentation materials that go with the comprehensive plan need to be tied to it too, because I think if this document, I did a presentation in November, and I think if you honestly take that presentation, which is actually somewhat animated and not actually a good way, it made me a little motion sick, but if you took that document, the PowerPoint part of it, and had that animated breakdown of these pieces, with this document, it'll feel different. It'll feel more approachable. It'll feel less like 300 and however many pages of text. So point her loud and clear. And I think any further presentation of it, because when it goes to the council, and be that a council meeting that we also warn as a joint planning board meeting to have a full planning board there or not, depending on whatever your choices are, that is absolutely a presentation that will happen, and one that should probably live on the website with a link just to the presentation, so that we don't sort of do these things only in the meeting and lose the resource after.
Good point.
Very
Yeah,
good.
Kayla, I seem to remember that we were talking about some of the planning members tag teaming with you. I think that I had volunteered for one or two.
I was thinking that too. I remember that.
I guess I'll have to come up to Vermont.
I think you're just looking for an excuse to cross state lines.
It's work.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments from staff members or board members?
Maybe engage the newspapers, see if they would be willing to write something up. I mean, they used to come to our meetings.
Mhm.
Maybe they're still watching, I have no idea, but
We can certainly do that. They reach out on occasion to us.
Okay.
great.
Usually the local newspapers are begging for content, so it's not too difficult to get something in.
All right. Well, we can move in that direction. Is there anything else we need to discuss on the subject tonight? If not, Kayla, thank you very much. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you all. It's very good to see
We
you
look
all.
forward to the summary.
And thank you all for making time. I know this is a special meeting for you all. And so that goes to the staff, the members of the committee, and also the public who joined on an unexpected Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Kayla.
Thanks, Kayla. Great suggestions.
Great to see you, Kayla.
You guys too. Have a good night.
Jay, Brian, you have anything else to tell us before we adjourn this work session?
No. The one thought running through my head is the potential timing of bringing this back. We're kind of, yeah. I guess we'll have to see how quick we could turn this, the information around and see how it lands on the schedule. I'd like to avoid a special work session if we can, but if we can't, then I'll be in touch and we'll try to coordinate that.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Can I just ask a
moved.
question?
Just Pam. It's hard to recognize you when we can't see you.
Yeah, I know. I forgot my camera at work. So Susan, what did happen with Shepherd's Run last night? Are you able to tell us or staff, do you know what happened when it went to the town council?
Yeah, it was approved. It was approved. There was a long discussion, approximately 2 hours maybe. It was approved with the recommendations that the planning board approved. A significant discussion on the entertaining a new zone there, the hospitality zone.
Right.
Ultimately, it was understood that it was the proposed conditions, the proposed route that the applicant was going in the conditions that were imposed effectively did the same thing. Yeah, that would be the one thing that I would take out of that was there was a lot of discussion on that component and concern about the same concern that the planning board had about other uses, unintended uses in the future.
Yeah.
It took a bit to understand that, with the conditions, that concern was mitigated. But he did get approval as your advisory was forwarded to them.
And I would point out that the public comment that was received on it, again, was overwhelmingly supportive of the project with, the same concerns that the planning board has heard about the Narrow River SAMP and the environmental stuff, but the underlying project itself was overwhelmingly supported.
Right, along with those conditions. So let's see where that goes. Thank you guys for putting in the work to get that information to the town council.
All right.
Welcome.
Have a motion for adjournment?
Yes, I made one.
Second?
Second,
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye,
good
Okay.
night.
We'll see you next Tuesday.
good night.
Wow, this
Okay.
is becoming a practice.
All
You're
right.
gonna-
And thanks to all of the participants, the citizen participants for joining us.
Yes,
Well taken.
thank you, yes.
All right. Good night, all.
Hi, everybody.
Right.